Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Joe Tyrrell and welcome back to the Runoff, the GP blog podcast. Just when we thought the title race was swinging one way, Max Verstappen fought back, winning the race at Imola in dominant fashion, securing the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix and closing the gap to Charles Leclerc in the process, who had a weekend to forget. We'll be taking you through all the action from a rain-soaked Imola, all before looking ahead to the first ever Miami Grand Prix. This is the 2022 season, episode 5.
Michael that was so not right. Get in there, Lewis.
George Russell, qualified Mr. Hamilton.
You are the world champion.
Well, Imola has returned to the calendar in its more permanent position. Joining me this week is just Cameron. Toby's got the week off. Cam, what did you make of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix?
I think it's fair to say that last year's race was a little bit more exciting, a little bit more rain-soaked last year, which I think helped. This year, there are a few interesting moments, but I think a lot of the coverage I saw was Lewis Hamilton just looking at the back of Pierre Gasly's car, which isn't the most interesting, especially when he can't get past. So an average race, Verstappen will be pretty happy with how things turned out.
Well, given Verstappen's struggles of late, he will be very happy indeed. He secured a dominant victory, winning the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. He took maximum points and closed the gap to Charles Leclerc massively because Charles Leclerc had a weekend to forget. It looked like, Cam, that we were set for this Verstappen, Sainz, Perez, Leclerc battle. But in the end, Ferrari didn't get their tactics right. Red Bull did, and Max Verstappen had an emphatic win.
Yeah, it's huge for Red Bull. They needed a weekend like this, and Ferrari, well, certainly didn't. I think Ferrari have been pretty plain sailing throughout the season so far. Red Bull have been the opposite, and, well, things turned around this weekend. Ferrari, Sainz, again, struggled all weekend, really. And Leclerc looked like he'd have the pace for maybe second. He looked like he could catch Sergio Perez, but we all know what happened. An untimely spin cost him some valuable points.
Carlos Sainz has had two back-to-back stinkers. And Charles Leclerc, who's looked so good over the last few weeks, well, he slipped down to, I think, 6th in the end. Was it by the time the checker flag was waved? Ferrari have looked so good. Will they start to worry? Maybe will the nerves creep in because they've got such a lead at the top? Will this be a concern for them going forward, or is it just one of those weekends?
I think Leclerc is a mistake, a one-off mistake from a driver who's been impeccable this year, so you can't put too much blame on him. It was a driver mistake. There's nothing sort of in doubt about that. Whereas Sainz, I think, will start to be feeling the pressure. Australia, this new contract, all in the space of a very short space of time. And, well, I'm a big fan of Carlos Sainz, but it's not been a great couple of weeks.
It has been a pretty torrid few weeks for Carlos Sainz, who did recently sign a new deal. So he'll be wanting to pay back that faith from Ferrari and get some results on the board, especially with Charles Leclerc doing so well. It was another weekend to forget, though, for Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. We heard Lewis Hamilton being apologised to by Toto Wolff after the race over the radio. It's weird because both Russell and Hamilton had really poor qualifying. They were both far down the grid. But then Russell got this incredible start and Hamilton was just stuck in the midfield.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for Lewis, really, because I think the sort of the finishing positions wasn't quite what he deserved. Obviously he never really made an impression on Pierre Gasly or even moving up the field, but he looked like he had the pace and just couldn't get a move done due to sort of being stuck in traffic. Whereas George, like you say, started a few places up, managed to get a good start and made the most of the circumstances around him. I think George placing his car in a very good position based on what happened with Ricciardo and Sainz and Alonso and everything. The cars ahead of him sort of paved the way for him to just drive through.
Yeah, Lewis had not a great weekend, but Russell will be delighted with his result. And although he'll be losing ground on those top few drivers, he's still in and around that mix sort of thing. So it looks better than it is for Russell, but for Lewis, he's already ruled himself out of the title race. And I think it's fair to say that probably is the case.
Yeah, definitely. I think Mercedes are realistic that this is they're probably going to have to take the year off in terms of a championship already. I don't think there's many upgrades any team could bring to bridge the gap they currently have to Ferrari and Red Bull, especially not within a season when you've got all the other complications going on of everything. So I think they're just kind of going to have to take the year off in terms of trying to win a title.
You mentioned there Mercedes taking a year off. Would it be ridiculous to say they should stop with 2022 and look to 2023 already, because it has been that bad for them so far?
Yeah, I don't actually think that would be a ridiculous shout. I mean, you might see them drop off a little bit this year, but there's not, obviously the Constructors' Championship is big with the money and everything like that. So there is value in finishing third of the Constructors rather than fourth or fifth, for example. And it obviously just looks better on the CV, really, finishing third than a little bit further down. But I think we saw what happened with Ferrari last year, 2021, I should say. And they didn't take the year off, obviously finished third, but they did start prioritizing this year's car, and we've seen them reap the benefits of that. So Mercedes could learn a thing or two in that regard.
Yeah, well, a weekend to forget to Mercedes, but we'll get into our winners and losers of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix now. So Cam, Toby's obviously not here, but he sent us in his winners and losers from the race. But I'll start with yours. We've just discussed a few big winners, a few big losers, and it's fair to say the biggest winners were Red Bull this weekend.
Yeah, it's the easy choice, but it's one that had to be talked about. A 1-2, winning the sprint race, fastest lap for Verstappen, job done, season back on track. No reliability issues, no even hint of it at all. Obviously, it's something that may be out of their control, but it seems like those reliability issues, the one that Verstappen had at Australia, seems like it's a one-off that they fixed, and they do look on course. They look back because they looked really, really quick, especially down that straight. Even when Leclerc was right at the front, he couldn't really make an impression on Perez. I think Red Bull have shown their hand now. They've shown what they're capable of. And Ferrari are going to have to up their game again because Red Bull are coming.
Red Bull are certainly storming right now. Like Leclerc's lead is big, but Red Bull just looked so good this weekend. And the fact that they've got the 1-2 as well, they didn't give any other teams a sniff, really. So that's them now. That's the standard for Red Bull. They have to match that going forward. But Toby's big winner this week is someone who's had a mixed start to the season. He's clearly the number one at his team, but Lando Norris, it's been a weird start for him, but this was a huge result.
Yeah, for sure. McLaren now look like unlike Mercedes, but they look like they've fixed whatever problems there were in Bahrain. I mean, seeing Ricciardo and Norris both in the bottom five for the start of that race in Bahrain was sort of when in the early stage of the race, I should say. It was a strange sight, very strange. But obviously Ricciardo this week, a little bit unfortunate with, I think he was probably more at fault for the incident with Sainz than the other way around, but it was deemed a racing incident. That's probably fair. And that sort of just curtailed his race, really. Strategy didn't work for him. But for Norris, yeah, excellent qualifying. He's shown in the past that he is brilliant in wet conditions, and he did it again. And in the race, took advantage of Leclerc's misfortune and got another podium at Imola like he did last year. And I think it's fair to say that Norris is very clearly number one driver, and that his season is he's back to the top of the midfield where he was last year, which didn't look like it was going to be the case. So I agree with Toby, he was a winner.
It's weird because McLaren, Norris, after I think Australia, when Norris sort of said, no, the car isn't any better, it's just clearly hooked up for tracks like Australia. Maybe he was bluffing a little bit because McLaren all of a sudden have a lot more pace. They look a lot more competitive, and Lando Norris's podium completely demonstrates that. But we'll come back to your other winner, Cam. Mercedes, we've mentioned them already. Russell and Hamilton have had very contrasting fortunes. It's obvious our winner isn't Lewis Hamilton, it's George Russell, who made an absolutely electric start.
Yeah, I'd like to put forward George because I've got to do Toby's job for him. He's not here, so someone's got to be the George Russell fanboy. And I think he deserves it. I think P5 is a little bit lucky, I would say, because obviously Ricciardo and Sainz, that incident, they probably would have been down the road if they hadn't collided, but Russell took his chance there. And also Bottas would have finished ahead of Russell had he not had an 11-second stop. So Russell on pace potentially wasn't the fourth quickest car, but that's the result he got. And yeah, I think I saw a stat, he's the only driver to finish in the top 5 in every race so far this season. Very consistent start to his Mercedes days, and impressive again. Taking advantage of situations is what he's done really well, and it's something that Hamilton certainly couldn't.
Great start for Russell to his Mercedes career in really difficult circumstances. So fair play, George. You're one of our big winners this week. We'll come on to the losers now. And Cam, we've just mentioned one Mercedes driver. We're going to talk about the other now. Lewis Hamilton has had a shocker this weekend.
Yeah, didn't get going, never got started, and we saw the result of that. Lewis has had a tricky start, especially with George looking like he settled really well at Mercedes. George has now had 4 back-to-back solid finishes, like I just mentioned, and Lewis hasn't quite had the same success. I think it's 2-2 now in the qualifying duel, and Russell's obviously ahead in the championship. Lewis was unlucky a little bit. just stuck in traffic. But at the same time, you make your own luck in any sport and in F1. And I think George did that by just qualifying a little bit higher up and being able to take advantage on that opening lap. And Lewis really should have been able to get past Pierre Gasly. I think he was clearly stuck in traffic. The aero was no advantage. There was no, I mean, when DRS was opened, Gasly also had it to defend from Hamilton, which certainly helps out. But at some stage, you've got to just be brave and think, well, I'm in 14th. If I go too deep into a corner and don't make it, I'm still going to be 14th. He could have tried something to turn two and potentially on a couple of occasions, maybe gone. It might be a bit of a reckless move, but try something because it was pedestrian-like, really. And we just saw, Lewis hasn't had this situation in F1 before. He mentioned it in his interview after the sprint race that Mercedes have had struggles before when he first joined the team in 2013, but it's not the same as it is now. He's never been in a car that's out the points. He's fighting for 13th place with Pierre Gasly. That's not a situation he's had in F1 before, and it's new surroundings, and it's not a great look for someone who was one of the favourites to win the title.
Yeah, no, not a great look at all for Mercedes. And it was a similar problem to what they've had in the past. The Mercedes is clearly not very good at going through traffic. They've had that problem in the past. If Bottas qualified low down in seasons gone by, he would always struggle to get through the field. So Lewis is clearly feeling the effects of a car which isn't up to scratch, and he's had an off weekend. So it's as simple as that. Mercedes, I can see them bouncing back later in the season, but it might be a long road for them. Toby's
Didn't you think Hamilton was going to win this weekend, Joe?
Yeah, well, I say a lot of things, Cam, but they're never normally correct or accurate. So we'll ignore the last episode. But Toby's loser is, well, could you get a much worse weekend given the position they were in? Ferrari had a shocker come lap 63. Sainz was out after, a couple of corners, and now Leclerc basically bottled a podium. It's not an ideal week for them, is it?
No, certainly losers. Toby's spot on here. Someone has to talk about Ferrari, and yeah, given how easy is potentially not the word, but yeah, it's been pretty comfortable for them so far this season. It was not what you wanted. Sainz just needed a good weekend after Australia and his contract announcement, and he didn't get it. Qualifying crash in the race. He'd done so much good work in the sprint race to get himself back up to P4, starting the second row of the grid and be in contention for a podium. And it was all gone within 2-3 corners when he, obviously not his fault, but not ideal. And then Leclerc just pushing too hard to try and catch up to Sergio Perez and get second, when it's essentially just a bit of impatience. I think played a lot. It's hard to say because drivers always want to win. They always want to overtake the person in front of them, but there should have been a thought in the back of Charles's mind that it's bigger than this one race, the championship. Gaining 15 points for third or 18 points if you come second, it's maybe not the biggest difference in the world. Finish third, move on, because he's pushed too hard and it's cost him a shed load of points, finishing sixth.
It's weird because it's such a contrast to the form they've showed at the start of the season. Reliable, well-organised and ruthless. Carlos Sainz and Leclerc, but now Sainz has had 2 off weeks. Leclerc's had this one. We mentioned in the earlier, it's probably not time for them to worry yet, but maybe it is for Sainz. He's had a bad weekend again. That contract is clearly looming a little bit, but I'm sure from Leclerc's point of view, he'll take it on the chin, head to Miami, and chances are he'll be as emphatic as he has been. But it very much did feel like the scales have balanced out a bit. Verstappen, Red Bull, Perez looked really good this weekend, and Ferrari maybe had an off weekend. So they'll look to bounce back in the States, which we will look towards now, Cam. We're going to preview the Miami Grand Prix. So a race I've been waiting for a long time, since it was announced, which I believe was around September last year, not 100% sure. But the Miami Grand Prix, the second race in the United States, the first of 2 this season. Cam, are you excited for this race?
Yeah, I am. I think I always am for a new circuit. It's yet to be seen how good the circuit will be for overtaking. It doesn't look like it's potentially the best, but we've seen that in the past. I think just a new circuit going to Miami, it'll be a party atmosphere. And I think just the teams having zero data always makes things a bit more interesting because they go into the weekend a little bit blind, whereas teams will go to Imola this weekend, say, and they know everything that happened last year. You can use that kind of data to sort of guide what they're going to do in the weekend. So that's completely gone, which always makes it a little bit exciting and hoping for some good action. Yeah,
it'll be really interesting. Let me take you back to 2020 when we had basically an entirely new calendar, last minute preparations, and I think it really good excitement in the race. It was unpredictable, especially at the new tracks, Portimao, when we went to Imola for the first time. We also went to Istanbul, Bull. So there were lots of races where teams had little to no data at all, and it just made everything a lot more unpredictable. And I think we could see, probably just for 1 year only, because will we go in there for years to come? But I think this weekend we could see, well, in a fortnight's time, we could see a really exciting race, and it'll be interesting to see whether Red Bull can carry this momentum they've got now, because it really is momentum, given the state of the victory it was, into that race weekend, or will Ferrari fight back? Because, well, they'll want to make a response, won't they?
Yeah, for sure. Or will Mercedes make a comeback? Who knows? Nah, I think it's Red Bull v Ferrari this year, pretty much every race. And I think it'll be yet another duel between those two in Miami. And let's hope there's a little bit more action between the drivers at the front than there was this weekend. I want some more Leclerc, Verstappen on-track battles.
Well, there was a hint at your prediction there. Toby's gone pretty bold with his predictions. He's gone for the out-of-form Carlos Sainz to win the race. He's got Charles Leclerc on pole position, and K-Mag, who has already been a surprise this season. He's Toby's surprise for the race. But Cameron, you're here. You're going to tell me who's your winner, your pole position, and your surprise for the Miami Grand Prix.
So my winner will be Sergio Perez. I'm going to keep, I predicted him for the Imola, and I'm going to double down on him this time. Pole, I think Verstappen will get pole. And I can just see Verstappen getting into some trouble somewhere, maybe with Leclerc, maybe in the pits, that kind of thing. Maybe that's just wishful thinking to see someone other than Leclerc or Verstappen win a race this year. And my surprise of the weekend will be Yuki Tsunoda to beat Gasly again.
I like this Yuki Tsunoda shout. He's been in great form lately. Well, I say great form. I can't actually remember watching much of him in the race, but he did pull off some nice moves. I think I remember one on Vettel where he just bided his time. It was all over him, and then he just made the move stick. But I am going to go with a George Russell victory.
Toby in disguise.
A George Russell surprise, and he's not going to start on pole. He's going to start P3. He's going to win from P3. And I'll go with a Charles Leclerc pole position. Those are our predictions for the Miami Grand Prix. That is all from myself and Cam. Cam, thank you for joining me after the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix.
Thank you very much for having me. I love your Mercedes optimism.
Oh, I'm always optimistic with Mercedes because I always think they're sandbagging. But we'll be back in a fortnight's time with the post-race debrief for the first ever Miami Grand Prix. In the meantime, if you want to check out any of the old episodes, they're all on Spotify. So go and check us out over there. You can watch the full episodes on YouTube. But we'll catch you next time. See you in 2 weeks.
Michael,